Call this meeting to order. Tonight, we're gonna be leading the pledge by Mr. Gary Eaton.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. I'd like to welcome everyone to this, our first budget meeting of this year. Mr. Sandberg looks like he's did us a good job as far as giving us the information we need to look at. I think tonight he'll basically go over, him and Mr. Oden go over what they've got in mind, and we'll go back. We'll take what they've given us and give us 2 or 3 weeks to look over it. I think we've got 3 meetings scheduled, if not 4, I believe. But we'll meet till we get it right. And so, Mr. Oden.
Okay. I'd like to begin by sharing something with you, kind of as we begin the process. I'm going to step out here to the computer. And look at that. You have a document that looks like this, inflation adjusted for that one. Just, and this is just information for us to kind of begin with as we take a look at it, because I think it helps you as you talk to constituents and that sort of thing. So if we could do that. And this is not new information to you, but if you recall, this happens to be the 2001 and 2 state report cards. It's not our numbers, it's state numbers, and this is a 1213. So in 2001, 2002, and the reason I kind of picked that year, that's kind of where our fact book was going back to, and you received a copy of that. At that time, the per pupil expenditure for us was $56.65, and the state was $6,055. Well, just doing the math, we were $390 below the state average for basically the instructional part. That means, if we just do a simple division, we were actually spending 93.6% as much as the Tennessee average, or 6.4% less than the Tennessee average. The most recent report card, which was 1213, because we haven't finished 1314 yet, the per pupil expenditure for Rutherford County was $8,010.68, which I'm just going to call $8,011. And the state of Tennessee per pupil expenditure is $9,293. And so you've heard this figure before. We spent $1,282 less than the state average in 12 and 13 per pupil for instructional purposes. We are actually now 13.8% less than the state average. So that's almost double. That information is there. So that's kind of the difference when you stop and look at that. But so that wasn't new information that we spent $1,282. I asked myself the question back in January or February, how are we doing inflation-wise? So I just want to share that with you tonight. If we take the same information in 2001 and 2, we spent the funding 42.7% of Rutherford County's budget, and I just cut and pasted this from a state report card, was local funds, 42.7%. And then in local funding for 1213, local funding was 39.04% of the per pupil expenditure. So doing a little bit of calculation, pulling that 42.7 times the 56.65 in 2001 and 2, local monies was $2,419 per pupil in Rutherford County monies per pupil. In 2012-13, taking 39.04% of that $8,011, $3,127 per pupil. So if your constituents or someone asks you about what do we spend locally per pupil, that means that should be very close to it. Well, the question I was asking myself, have we gone way over inflation? People talk about our budgets going up, that sort of thing. Or are we kind of increasing just commensurate with the student growth? I mean, obviously the dollar figures are larger because we're getting more students. We have many more students than we had in 2001, 2002. So, and I only have 3 slides, and this is the last one for you here. This is inflation adjusted per pupil expenditures. And I can't remember exactly, it's Department of Commerce or Labor or something, actually has an inflation calculator. So what I did was I put in 2001 and said, if you spend $1 and you move it to 2013, and of course inflation compounds as a year, so what would that dollar be worth? And this is cut and pasted right off of this chart. It would take $1.32. The cumulative rate of inflation, according to this, was 31.6%. So you ask yourself the question, using this cumulative rate of inflation from 2001 to 2013 of 31.6%, we can calculate the expected per pupil expenditure in 2013 in 2001 dollars. In other words, if we just kept up with inflation, how much would we be spending per pupil? That's the question I asked. So taking the 2419 in 2001 times 1.316, and that's where that comes from up there, 1.316 when you convert it to a decimal, we should be spending $3,183 inflation adjusted. But we actually spent, if you remember from the report card, $3,127. So even using inflation, you're spending $56 per pupil less than you spent in 2001 and 2, inflation adjusted. Now, why has that happened? I mean, you are a board that watches your dollars and cents. I mean, this shows me that. We've done some things in green energy. Obviously, we've come back and taken ways to deal with our electricity consumption, our water consumption. We're doing lots of things really to try to save and stretch the tax dollars as much as we can. So basically, in summary, Rutherford County Schools spent $56 less per pupil in 2012-13 than in 2001-2 when adjusted for inflation. We've remained high academically performing. The information, I think, speaks to how efficiently and effectively Rutherford County School Board and employees are serving students and operating schools. So as you get asked that question, whatever it might be, well, you know, $56 per pupil times 41,000 students, I mean, that's another little over $2 million there in addition. So you saved in 2012-13 just from inflation better than $2 million. Any questions? I just want you to understand going into this, and for the public that's watching us tonight, as we begin to look at the numbers, that we are very efficient, and we try very hard to do that, spend the money wisely. I'm a taxpayer just like each of you are.
We certainly want our funding body to understand that good stewardship.
That is also on top of the amount less that we spend than the state average.
Right.
The way I see
Right, it is.
when you look at it in that perspective, it's in addition to what we've already saved compared to the state average, which I don't know how well that balances, but it does show that we're fairly efficient.
But our dollars did go up, obviously, but our student enrollment went up. And so part of that state funding and all that comes with that new stuff, the average daily membership funding. So even though the total dollar figure for expenditure is up, and it would be, again, when you consider inflation or you just consider in comparison to the state, we're still spending less per pupil than what's happening in the state, and even less than we were in 2001, 2002. Okay? Jeff, I'll let you come up and take over. So what we're... I really kind of like to talk facts and figures rather than more so than philosophies. But tonight what we're going to do is give you more of an overview of the budget. You have a copy of the budget line item by line item. Wouldn't expect you to be able to do a lot with that tonight. Wasn't our purpose. You need time to study it and to look at the categories. But Jeff is going to now go over some of this information with you tonight. And please ask any questions you would like to ask, or anything that you would like to follow up on that. And we'll get into the budget for estimates for 2014, 2015.
Let me,
Mr. Sandy?
let me bring up the file. thought I had copied to the network. Okay. All right. The next 2 pages in your packet are text. The page after that has pink, yellow, and blue highlighting on it. So,
Would you like this pointer, Jeff? I can give it to you if you like it.
I think I'll be fine with this. Technical difficulties. Okay, well, you've got extra columns you get to see now more than, okay. The general purpose school budget, the GPS budget, is the largest budget in the county. It gets 45.5% of the property tax rate. $1.19.3 of the overall $2.56.52 property tax rate. I know I should probably say mills. Now, county general is the second largest. Debt service is the third largest. Currently gets 58.62 cents, 22.85% of the property tax rate, and about 83.7% of that budget is for school-related debt. Ours is the lion's share, obviously. We have our Fund 177, Educational Capital Projects. You'll be approving a budget for it later. The county does the debt service budget entirely on its own. And that fund gets, it is the 5 cents that was shifted a few years ago, but through reappraisals, and now it's been dropped to 4.51 cents. That's 1.76%. And the other budget, which you'll get at a later meeting, you also approve the cafeteria fund budget, which is a self-supporting program, gets no local tax revenues. It's what the parents and the students pay in and our federal reimbursements. And then, of course, you approve the federal project budgets as the projects are brought forward to you. Tonight, we'll focus on the first draft of the 2014-15 general purpose school budget and talk about some of the changes since we approved the 2013-14 budget. It's early in the process. We'll be revising this proposed budget as more data becomes available. Each meeting, I will give you a list or a summary of what has changed. It's too early to address our revenue side. We should get the preliminary state BEP, Basic Education Program numbers, in April. I hope we'll have, I think our next meeting is on April 10th. And I hope we'll have them by then. I don't know. I was talking to one of my friends there, and they're having a real challenge. Last year, Memphis City and Shelby were consolidated into one. That's one challenge. This year, they're getting to break new Shelby County into 6 different budgets. And that's a very complex process.
16th, Joyce, is it?
No, our next one is the 16th.
That's what we're saying.
Now you have, on the 10th, you have a budget meeting at the courthouse.
Oh, okay. Sorry
You do
about
have a
that.
budget meeting.
Well, hopefully, we will have the BEP by the 16th. Some of this stuff, they have a spring fiscal conference, and that is at the very end of April, I think May 1st and 2nd. Some of the answers I will get at that meeting, so we could have things changing after that based on state input. The page with the shading, it's a modified version of that monthly financial summary I send you each month. I don't send it in July, usually not in August because so little goes on, but September during the school. There's another column. Right after the captions, the first column of numbers to the left is this draft budget. $317,466,287. Our current budget, with the couple of amendments we've done, is $302,152,040. And I hoped it would come in lower, but with the things we've got going on and things we really need to address, it is in dollars 5.1% higher. In positions, 2.9% higher. We right now are standing right at 2.95% growth over the same period last year. This budget has been built to cover 3 to up to 3.5% growth in students. And with what we see in the 7th, 8th, and 9th months, if that rate of growth picks up, we might have to look again. That is a sign, historically in the past, that has been a sign that we're going to grow a lot over the summer if we are continuing to grow in these last periods.
Of
So,
course, if additional students move in and it's greater than 2.9, then would be state ADM monies also that
Right.
would match that.
Mhm.
You know, so that, there would be additional revenue in your estimate too, so that's.
The
Between the two.
legislature has cut the growth funds in the budget, the total from 27 million this year to 20 million next year. So we will get less growth money per student.
But you've taken that into consideration in your 317 needs, correct?
I've taken it into account on the expenditure side, and we'll see what happens on the
But-
revenue side as we get into
So
that.
basically, your 317 is basically just, it's primarily growth.
Primarily growth, what we have heard on a state teacher pay increase, but until the legislature leaves, that's very fluid.
They said roughly 2%. One of the things we're running into for that, we're not on that line item now, but they're saying they may not apply that 2% to the state minimum salary schedule. So my question to Jeff, which he couldn't answer, well, how they gonna calculate the 2%? BS and 5, masters? I mean, and so, you know, even though they're saying 2%, you could very well not get a true 2%.
Yeah.
If more of your teachers happen to have higher degrees or some other things. So that's an unknown quantity to us. Another thing, and about 3 weeks ago, I happened to be at a session at Chamber of Commerce in which our state legislators were there. And Bill Ketron brought up the fact that the state's F&E, the excise taxes, that was the thing, the Nissans, the FedEx and all pay, was down roughly $100 million. And they said they really did not know why, but the governor has actually gone back to his state departments and said, hey, we may have to take another $100 million state dollars out of the state budget, which they're considering now. And again, I haven't heard anything in about those 3 weeks when that statement was made, but there's a potential there that there may be additional adjustments. Once upon a time, years ago, very often the governor would propose 2% raise for all state employees and teachers. And the legislature would come back and said, hey, we found a little more money, we're gonna add 1% for that. And then would say it'll be 3. You know, and I think, I hate to say it's a game, but it's part of that process of doing it. But I think what you can say this year, if that F&E tax is short $100 million, it'd be much less likely this year that you're gonna see an adjustment on whatever that 2% might have been. That takes your odds away somewhat, I think.
Well, and also one of the issues for us and for other systems, a couple of years ago, the raise was initially going to be a non-recurring bonus. So we would have to come up with matching money, but it wouldn't have been a recurring expenditure for us. At the last minute, the legislature changed it and made it a raise so that our we pay about half, and I'll have to look up the exact number, of it's between 45 and 50% of any state raise we have to pay covered out of our local funds. So there is an impact on us and all the systems across the state when that happens. The state does not pay 100% of the cost of a state raise.
You would-
Matching requirements.
Yeah.
You would think $100 million loss in state revenue, excuse me, that they would have a clue as to why that was occurring. I mean, that big a
Yeah.
change,
Yeah.
because the economy has gotten better, you know, in comparative numbers to 2008. So, you know, it seems a little ironic that it would be that big a loss.
I heard some musing that maybe some corporate,
Didn't touch it for a while.
okay,
The power
okay.
saving mode.
That perhaps some entities were changing their corporate structure and managing to legally avoid that tax, have it no longer be applicable. One other tax that we are locally going to see a change in is the timing of the business license tax changed. So I'm watching that one very closely. From talking to a friend of mine at State Department of Revenue, I think we should pretty much wind up with our budgeted amount, but the timing of it is going to be very late to get in. So that, I think that run as much as $1.8 million, which makes a difference when we're coming in with final numbers and all. So I'll be looking at that one closely. Any other questions? Okay. Back to the sheet with the shading, which is up on the monitor. The pink highlighted lines show our staff, the first one, payroll taxes and benefits, and then a subtotal for payroll and all of our benefits. The staff and benefits combined run 82.6% of our budget. And basically, once we fill a position, we have very little control over the benefits cost and the like for that year. If we fill it, we're going to incur the cost. That, as a percentage of our budget, has been going up the whole time I have been here. The two areas that have increased, retirement and especially medical insurance. Right now, the $3 million difference I'm showing in this 2014-15 versus the 13-14 budget, most of that is attributable to, we just had a 24% average increase that started in January. We pay 6 months of that this fiscal year at the school board, and then next September through December, we'll have 4 more months where at that higher rate, where that higher rate is new, where it takes new money. That's the main reason I think we got any property tax increase last year. I think my estimate at that point was $1,785,000 of that increase would hit us in the first part of the 2014-15 school year. So we do have that. We should find out Thursday what the recommendation for the rates is for next year. And I'm hoping I was a little high. I wasn't terribly high. Last year I thought I was being reasonable and I put in 8% and it came out 24%. But our trends in the insurance fund have been looking good. So I think it should be a very minor increase. Okay, I explained the insurance. Any questions on that? We really have not seen as much impact based on what we have seen in 2 months, January, February, I think my projections of how many employees would opt for insurance we're going to be in good shape in this year's budget for medical insurance. Okay. Below the third pink line, those are our non-employee expenditures. The yellow lines, we don't have a lot of control over. Bus contracts, number of students we've got, what happens with fuel prices.
Roughly, a little over 50% of the students ride buses.
It's shutting down.
So if you
I'm
go
sorry,
by
how many?
1,000, you're gonna have at least 500 more, probably on bus. But that's an estimate, so it kind of depends on ages and that sort of stuff, but roughly.
And substitute teachers, I'm just gonna shut this down, it's being happy tonight. Substitute teachers, we appear to be in very good shape in this year's budget. We're gonna be close, but we're not running over. And because the Affordable Care Act provisions on requiring insurance were postponed a year, the budgeted increase we had to take effect in January of 2014 won't take effect until January of 2015. And our sub-provider Advantage is not going to charge us the higher rates until we get there. Our utilities, again, based on what I saw end of February, I did not make any changes. Later, yeah, we may make some changes. But that's one that's hard to judge. There's enough lag time in the timing of the bills, but we'll look at that. Textbooks, there's a significant increase, and I don't know if y'all remember, we amended $1,250,000 out of fund balance this year, and this year we will be buying the social studies books in May, June. After I got the textbook orders in last year, and that was about the lowest adoption we have, we needed to amend money in. This is nearly $1.3 million higher than that textbook number.
And it's math textbooks, and of course,
Yeah.
now that high school students have to have 4 years of math, you're gonna have math textbooks that will be actually PK or in K all the way through 12. So just every student we have will have a math textbook. That's exactly what you're gonna have, so.
Find those costs a little higher than social studies books, is there any comparison?
The high school books will be a little higher, probably.
In science, maybe perhaps?
Probably a little higher in that, not necessarily in elementary, but,
Yeah.
and the price of textbooks are very close to the same price. I mean, they're competitive. So whether it be McGraw-Hill or somebody else, or Pearson or Laidlaw, or whoever it happens to be, they're gonna be very close.
Well, and do you want to mention again just the situation we're currently in with moving toward electronic textbooks and the costing there?
I mentioned that kind of at the last board meeting, again, just as a review. Right now, the cost is about $16 for an electronic textbook. 6-year adoption, you're looking at $96. Textbooks cost anywhere from, most of your elementary, from $85 or so up to $115 or so. Some of your high school books will get up to $130 or $40 with some of those. So, and then that doesn't include, if you go electronic, you've got to have the device to display it on, and the chargers and all the schools. So right now, economically, we really do not have a package that allows you to go fully electronic that's cheaper than actually buying the book. Now, if we buy the book, the companies will give you online access to textbooks, because as we tell our parents, if your child forgets his textbook, leaves it at school, hey, I can't do my homework, I don't have my textbook. All they got to do is log on with their code and they've got a copy of their textbook online. But schools everywhere are looking at this, but just the economy of it has not happened at this particular point, for whatever reason.
Insurance, this is our property casualty insurance. We are self-insured up to fairly high levels, and out of this line, our premiums come, and then there's additional money that basically I hope to always be able to transfer to our self-funded insurance reserves, making sure we are fully funded on potential claims. Trustees Commission, I'm thinking about 95% plus of it goes to the county. I've got a more exact number, but I
Well,
think,
since Doris Jernigan's not here any longer,
Yes.
I thought I'd go ahead and speak up on that.
yes. Our
And
work,
that was a question I was gonna ask you, how much of that went back to the,
it's a little over 95%, I believe, or a little under 95.
and that's just,
Yeah.
and I'm with Doris, I still don't understand why that's in the statute, why that's there. That just,
Yeah,
I mean, it's-
yeah.
That, for me, that needs some explanation.
well, we've
Well,
talked,
I mean, I'm lost because I'm not been exposed to that.
to the,
To the trustees commission.
It's the law.
well, yeah, we
And the
We
law
write it-
says
write them a check.
to which trustee? To
County
To
trustee.
county
county
trustee.
trustee who invests the money.
Well, he-
No.
Operates their office, I think they
Yeah.
get.
Well,
most
it goes
of
toward there, a lot of it is returned to the overall county budget
General fund.
and helps
well,
support
the
the
trustee keeps the portion he
Yes.
needs
Mhm.
percentage-wise
Right.
from us, and then everything else transferred
Yeah.
back. So it's like the giveth and it gets taketh
Yeah.
away, so it's
So is
just
that
kind of,
included in every budget for every service in
Everyone who has
the
revenue.
county?
Mhm.
Every,
Everyone who has revenue.
okay.
So roughly $2 million almost, just, your budget's up 2 million over, it'll actually just go back to the county, just the way it is.
you know, and I don't know if that's something that we continually need to remind our funding body that, 95% of this $2 million is coming back to you anyway. And I don't know if we've done that or not, but this might be a good year to do that, so.
Which also brings up a question that was asked to me, and it might have been asked to you, Mr. Blair, is like, do we give back to the city? Do we give any revenue to the city?
No, we do not.
We do not.
No.
The county
Now,
does?
we do our property tax, all the components of property tax. Our local revenues, though, are shared with the city based on weighted full-time ADM. Last year, that was about 14.3%. Because those taxes are for education in the county. So if you have special school districts or city systems, they are shared based on that.
Basically, you can add the number 41,000 students from Rutherford County Schools, the 7,500 from the city, put it together, and whatever percent
Yeah.
of those actually attend the city system, then they get, of the property taxes, how many cents are allocated to education, they get that percentage back. Because they pay county taxes also. I mean, that's the theory.
Now, our workers' compensation, we recorded under this title, we have an on-the-job injury program, and our costs have been pretty constant on that. The
And we have a
next
pretty good
yellow line down is
And
our
we have a
park.
pretty good record on work,
Oh, yeah.
comp claims too,
Mhm.
Mr. Clardy, I think, instituted a program several years ago that made a big improvement in the losses there.
And our HR department with Ms. Barnes
Yeah.
and Ms. McLeod, we go over those and
Team effort.
sometimes contest them.
The park technology equipment line, we got $2,120,000 from the state this year, and we got So this is an expenditure we won't have next year. We won't have the revenue either. We have built in an additional $1 million for technology. We hope we can keep it.
Steve, if you remember, Mr. Solomon said earlier when he did his presentation, what else do you need? And he said probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.9.
Yeah.
If you remember that figure that he used, although we do not have that much built into the budget at this time.
So you don't have, based on this, you don't have anything.
I'm not showing anything in that particular line, but if,
Next line.
in the next one day.
Other equipment?
Yeah, between instructional equipment, the line above it, and the line below it, other equipment. Yeah, we've got money in there.
Why don't,
Or where is it showing? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, in other equipment. $1,546,065 in next year's budget versus $459,149 in this year's budget.
I guess where I'm going, why don't you put it under the technology equipment, Parker?
Because I thought it would be better to separate it since we had the revenue coming from the state that offset that expenditure. We won't have any state revenue coming to offset this.
That was a one-time
Additional
gift
million.
from the state.
Correct.
Park was.
Yeah.
We're basically putting money in it.
Right.
You're putting it in two other categories here, is what you're doing.
I really just carved out this park technology equipment line, showed it separately to show that we're not going to have the revenue, and that revenue is totally paid for this. We got 2.12 million.
Probably when you get to the line items and go over that.
But
it'll
yeah,
be a
when we
little
get
bit
into
more
line items, I think that
Where
would
the
be,
accounting line
a little
item numbers is
clearer.
probably gonna show that to you a little bit better.
yeah. At the next highlighted line down, lighting and sensors, the various energy efficiency things we've got. We still have $550,000 a year in interest and principal. Last year's budget, we had $1,124,000, but we paid off the first and the biggest project that we did. So,
How many years was that set up?
7 years.
7, okay.
Yes, sir. I think,
So basically, we probably got one more year.
well, the water, we will have that one going on several more years. I'll have to check and see when we finish up
Electrical.
the sensors. And I also excluded transfers to other funds, or highlighted it there, because this is money that we transferred to the Blackman Middle School project out of our fund balance. So the blue line is a subtotal of these non-labor, non-benefit expenditures. So we're about $1 million higher in the 14-15 budget than in the 13-14 budget. And this is the area, well, I'll wait on that. Projects. Yeah. This is the area where we tend to hold back on expenditures in order to come up with the money we're going to have to come up with to help fund the budget from our fund balance. This year, we used $10.353 million from our unassigned fund balance to balance our budget. Our expenditures, opening budget, 10.3 million higher than our projected revenues. And then we also took $1.25 million out for textbooks. And, it's harsh reality, we're going to have to cover most of that amount. We would love to only use $8 million in fund balance this year. I don't know if, it's too early to say where we will be on that. But that is a concern, that is an area we need to watch in our budget. Ideally, yeah, I'm fine with using 2.5% or so. But because we can pretty well depend on that much reverting unexpended, any budgeted expenditure that you don't make increases your fund balance. Any revenue over your budget increases your fund balance. What you have to watch is when the economy goes down, any revenue under budget, any shortfall in your budgeted revenue reduces your fund balance. So we have to watch the mix between those two. And, that's the scary part when you're funding 11.6 million of a $302 million budget out of fund balance. Most years we have a few major issues we have to address in the budget. This year, really, growth is our first one. We need to be able to cover 3 to 3.5% growth in students. At Stewart's Creek High School, we'll have about 5 new teaching positions. We will have a much larger senior class and a larger freshman class than we had this year. They'll get their 4th assistant principal, their 4th guidance counselor. We have 4 new vocational positions. Some of those may wind up at Stewart's Creek High. We talked some about the medical insurance. Again, 4 months of this year's 24% increase. Another item we have under other benefits, this year there is a $63 charge per covered life. So for a family of 4, it's $252 that is built into the Affordable Care Act, into Obamacare. We have that in our budget. Next year, it drops to $44 per covered life. So that is several $100,000 to us. Okay, we've got additional bus routes, about 238 existing routes. I missed Mr. Snell when I tried to confirm.
I think that's correct.
Pardon?
I believe you're correct. I believe it's
Well,
238.
I tried to
That's
confirm
right.
it with him, and so I put about. And possibly, we have another 8, 7 transit and 1 special ed bus built in to this version of the budget. I mentioned the substitute contract, but I think we should be all right pretty much with the current budget. Technology, we've discussed. Steve's estimate that we'll need an additional $2.9 million to get ready for Park. And we put $1 million in, $1 million increase in. One of the things that I was hoping wouldn't be this major, in our total budget it isn't, but 7 federal positions are moving to the GPS budget. We knew that our data manager position, Kevin Whittington, would have to move into this year's budget. We're also having to take 6 special ed positions that basically, because of sequestration and losses in federal funding, we're having to move those people into the GPS budget. We still have performance services. We don't get excused from that, even though we have to fund. And they're positions that we've put into the federal funds in tight times in the general purpose school fund budget. We knew they would have to at some point come out. Earlier this year, we took the special ed technology position and moved it into the GP budget. I presented y'all an amendment on that. I was hoping for 1 or 2 this year instead of 7, but it didn't work out that way. Any questions?
Could we at some point in time, maybe either through memo or email, or maybe even at a budget meeting, remind the board of the mandates that we're under federally that are not funded? I mean, that we have to do it, but they have yet to fully fund No Child Left Behind or any of their other programs. And you know, that, I think it's something the general public should know, that these mandates, we have to do them, but we're not getting the federal dollars to do them. They're having to be picked up by either local dollars or, well, I guess it would be local dollars.
And we have state
Yeah,
unfunded
there's
mandates
two
too.
big ones coming up for next year. One of those is, remember the old STAR attendance program is gone. The state's paying a portion of it, but in the past, they paid all of it. We just really paid for support, and they covered the software course, and we paid some for extra direct support. But now that's the cost sharing, and I don't have it in front of me tonight.
Yeah,
I remember
don't
what
have
that cost sharing is, but we'll have to pay for part of the actual software for the new attendance program. Another thing that's an unfunded mandate is the response to intervention squared, basically, which is the new regular ed program the state is converting to, that students have to be screened for interventions, and the cost of a screening tool to do that is not covered by state funds, but yet you're mandated, it has to be a screening tool that's nationally normed. So we don't know, the state's done some bidding, they've got some figures, they haven't given that to us about what that's going to cost. But that's an unfunded mandate.
Does that apply to all students or
It
just
does.
students at a certain level?
All students. Right now it does. You know, if I could rewrite that thing, I don't see any need in the world taking the high achieving students and doing the screening and all with them. I mean, they don't have an issue. But again, I didn't write that requirement.
And they aren't usually involved in intervention classes either, so.
And they will not be, but we evidently have to go through the screening process.
Revenues and fund balance. Right now, as I said earlier, our revenues are a great unknown. Once I get the April estimate, next week I will have March's revenue numbers, which really tie our February numbers. There's a lag. But we'll be getting, each month, we'll be able to refine some of this data, especially on the revenue side. The trends, you generally by March, and definitely April, May, if you historically have been at 90% of a revenue, you're going to be at 90% or close, and you can start to refine those estimates. As a summary, we used 11.6 million of fund balance for this year's budget. We used 9.25 for the 2012-13 budget, and 6,460,000 for the 11-12 budget. I've got a typo there, didn't catch that. For last year's budget, a new penny for the schools would generate $498, would have generated $498,821. But that is how, we will hear the commissioners referring to any shortfall as X pennies on the property tax. It should probably come in a little higher than that this year, but that's what it was generating for last year's budget.
Let me say a little something here. And again, for people that might be watching us on television and all, people say I hear so many times you've got growth, it should be paying for itself. But most people know basically that the average property tax on a house or an apartment or wherever they're living in, probably $800 to $1,200 a year will catch many of them, property tax. Well, you saw earlier that the local share for per student is around $3,000. So pure property tax growth is never really much going to pay for the cost per student. If there's 1.5 or 2.0 kids in a house, it's more. So it's very, very important for people to do their shopping in Rutherford County, because our sales tax is one of the things that makes up a lot of this, and very important to us in that. So to make up that shortfall between what a house taxes will bring in, of course, we have to share that property tax with the sheriff's department, with the ambulance service, and all of the services in Rutherford County. So very, very important. Sound like the Chamber of Commerce, I know. But it's very important that we shop in Rutherford County and spend our money here, because it saves us money in the long run by being able to do that.
And all of the property in Rutherford County right now has a tax rate. And so the fact that someone moves into Rutherford County and occupies a piece of land that may not have been occupied previously, it might change the tax rate, but it's still the same piece of property. It's not like we're making more property, but we can make more commerce. So we can have, more revenue through commerce in Rutherford County, but the amount of land based on property taxes, that's kind of a fixed commodity.
And just in your example, it's a 4-to-1 ratio if you're guessing $800. And that family may have 3 students,
I know.
which takes it well beyond that and makes it about a 12-to-1 ratio, if you will. So you just keep falling behind as the community grows, as the county grows. You just keep falling behind. It gets exponentially large with the increase of the growth.
Rutherford County's growth has been a lot of starter homes and younger families, and they tend to bring more children to the table. The Williamson counties and some of those tend to have, it's not gonna be $1,200 because you've got $750,000 $1 million homes. And very often, by the time a family acquires those, the children are just about out of high school, they can finally afford it, or families are not quite as large. But with our economy built very much around startups and that sort of thing, we have a higher cost associated with that. More children, more students.
Well, as of today, our unassigned fund balance in the general purpose school fund is $13,373,000, 4.42% of our budget. We have to start the 2014-15 fiscal year with 3% of the 2014-15 GPS budget in fund balance. That means we've got $3,847,000 of this current fund balance that we can use to fund next year's budget. It means we needed 6-7 million more.
Lisa,
At least.
Nolan always reminds us of this, and that
Yeah.
amount, it becomes part of the discussions at the budget
Yeah.
committee. And
Mhm.
you've heard it before too, and you'll hear it again
Yeah.
when we have our meeting with the commission.
You're gonna be way short this year.
Well, I
If we could get some growth funds,
yeah.
you see the things that he's not able to account for now are pieces like, will there be some growth
Yeah.
monies come in?
Mhm.
Revenue estimates change.
Mhm.
Some, if the sales tax comes in, we
Yeah.
had a good state tournament, and if lots of visitors came in and sales tax comes up, then the numbers that he has here on the
Yeah.
revenue side will change. That's just what he doesn't
Yeah.
know at
I-
this point in
too early.
time. So,
Our sales tax collections have been doing very well this year. So,
So how's that 3.8 right there, how's that equate to previous years?
it's probably fairly close to previous years. It's just as the dollars we've been using have crept up, it just gets to be a little more daunting figure, especially if, well, we will just have to see how it looks. Our revenues are coming together, and that's probably in May when we'll be doing that, and maybe even after May closes in early June. And then, okay, what are we going to have to produce in savings versus what we can get from unbudgeted revenues in order to fund next year's budget? But again, we don't need that number to increase. The dollars that we are using from fund balance, we really need to try to be careful and cautious with that. We should be able to swing something
What did, we did a little bit, kind of while we're doing this overview, a little bit because we had the roofs and things like that. Typically, when you get into the line item, Stewart's Creek becomes ours. Right now, we're still on the warranty.
Yeah.
So very often, when you open a new high school, you're talking about 1 to 2 maintenance people when you cover 350,000 square feet or something. So, you know, that kind of kicks in for you next year. And also, we had the issue at Thurman Francis, you know, Smyrna Primary, Laverne with those roofs. So you're gonna see some funds built in to try to help deal with some of that in this increase. But with 82.6% personnel, that's, you don't have a lot of wiggle room. That's our issue.
The severe cold, how bad did that hurt us as far as utilities?
As I get this next month's of utility bills in, maybe I can have a better idea. As of end of February with what had hit, it was closer to last year's number than I would have thought.
I'm
So
surprised.
it was just too early, yes, it was too early to say, really.
Okay.
Remind me again how we migrated from 5 cents on the educational capital project budget to 4.5?
In the reappraisal year, the commission tends to do at least a partial rollback on the property tax rate. The certified rate in a reappraisal year is the rate that the new property tax rate that will generate the same dollars, same total property tax dollars as the previous year.
And we have an appraisal next year, right?
Right.
Or is it next year?
I think it's next year.
Next year, maybe a new appraisal for the county.
So it was set at 5 cents. We had a reappraisal, and because the property tax rate itself was rolled back,
Right.
this was rolled back as a percentage
Our
of.
share was held constant.
Okay.
The
But
dollar share was held constant, which reduced the percentage.
Yeah, the decision that the commission makes in that reappraisal year, are they going to roll back to the certified rate? Or are they going to go with something in between the old rate and the certified rate? Because if you look back in the, in the 70s, weren't we well over $3 or even over $4 on the property tax rate? I haven't looked at those numbers in several years. But it's slowly, in dollar, as the dollar value of the real estate has increased, the rate has slowly dropped. Total taxes have increased.
I just wonder if resetting that to 5 cents may be a way for us to be able to take care of those additional expenditures that we're going to have with properties that are 10 plus years old. And I don't sincerely expect that it would be well received on a year that we're currently in, and yet for us to float it and then pull it back or suggest it, let somebody know we thought about it, it may plant the seed for in the future, because we're going to have more capital expenditures in maintaining more buildings. And so some discussion about, we talk about, we want to remind the commission of this or suggest to the commission of that. I might suggest to the commission that resetting that to 5 cents could help us to maintain the increased number of buildings that they've been kind enough to help us to build.
Gary will say amen to you over there.
I'm sure. We just need to take small steps so that we maintain, because the small steps that we've taken over the past 10 to 11 years have absolutely allowed us to be in the good position we are right now. We've met the population growth. But if we don't continue to take those small measures, then we'll be in a bad way. And so for us to suggest that to the county commission, let them chew on it a little bit, maybe even let a few people campaign concerning those things. It may be beneficial to us, you know, a year from now. We're tasked as a board to look to the horizon, and that's what we need to do.
When you support that thought with the fact that we are 1,200 under a state average, we are, was it 56 or 36? 56, comparing dollars to dollars over a period of time, that's much less. The 1% or point whatever, boosting it back to 5% is much less than what we're talking about. That the school system is saving the county in a sense, you know, in a real sense.
Well, let me entertain this, though, that once you float it out there, don't pull it back. Not serious, because it's gonna be harder come next year to get it.
Understood. Maybe we floated it into the discussion even tonight.
And we need to continue to be grateful to Dr. Bob Bullen, who was on the county commission, who pretty much fathered that 5
Absolutely.
cents. So our really older structures have certainly benefited from that over the years. So,
to say something like
Mr. Carter?
I just wanted to say that we can already make a very strong case for that money. Figure-wise, we've got approximately $3.5 million of roofing that we need to be doing every year, or it's going to cave in on it. And the next major thing is heating and air conditioning system. We need to spend a bunch of money. We've done a strategic plan and looked at this recently. And then that still leaves all of the paving, anything else, the tennis courts, for instance. I mean, not tennis courts, but track, resurfacing those. I mean, there's all kind of things like that that's hanging out there. Bleacher replacement, I mean, in gym, those types of things are coming due. As these things get over 10 years old, some of the, I mean, we've got a bunch of schools out there that are coming due.
And the, you know, test scores are certainly the things that we can email and fax to a corporation that we're trying to get into Rutherford County. But when they come here to visit, it's the facilities that are going to attract them. So it's good for our county commission, it's good for our county that we have facilities that look inspiring and motivational for our students.
and in good repair.
Yes.
And let me just add, I had the privilege of visiting Laverne, first time I've been in that building in a long, long, long time, and they were taking good care of that building. I know it costs money to take good care of that building, but that building looks not new, but it's in good shape for the shape that it's in, if you will.
Mr. Sandvik, I also did a little adding, and I may be missing something, but we're adding right at $1 million in bus contracts.
Right.
And yet, if we think a bus is 60, 70,000 per route,
It's, for this, yeah, what we pay per year.
okay? You know, it seems like we're anticipating some additional expenditures there.
A 2% raise built in to the mileage and the seat rate,
Okay,
and then the new routes.
new routes and fuel. Okay,
Yeah, and I'm a little shy in this year's budget on the fuel price
really?
adjustment funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a little bit of shortfall this
A little
year,
bit of shortfall
2%.
this year.
All right, all right.
Okay. The next two for you to study on, there's a 4-page summary I use every year. This one adds across all of the functions, like 71-100, the first page in the 31-page packet. Well, it adds everywhere that we have classroom teachers, you see all of the teachers in that teacher line. On page 2, you see all of the Social Security added up from every page in here. There's a 4-page summary, and then there's the 31-page details. And Mr. Odom and I will be going over those with y'all at our next meeting.
It's unfair tonight to go over line item with you till you've had a chance to study it. You know, I mean, it's just not fair to you. I can let you go down and we can talk just a little bit about some of those if you want to. A little bit roughly on the summary page, and I'll give you a little bit of information there. There's, and you can see the positions and that sort of thing we're talking about. We're talking about adding a person to accounting. Part of that deals with the salary, the tracking of that 501. I mean, all of our retirements and all of that personnel. The guidance personnel. And I can actually give you that. That's about 3 people there. One of those goes just to Stewart's Creek High, again, because of their numbers. The others are basically half positions, where some of our elementary schools are getting so large and all, they got a half-time guidance counselor to try to build that up. We still use, if you'd like it, I mean, I can get you that. We still use the old SACS standards to try to follow that, and we actually track it on something that looks like this, where we put in an estimate of the number of students we have in, and using the SACS standards over here, how many positions that would require. Now, the Southern Association does not require specific numbers of people like that, like they used to, but it's a pretty good staffing ratio. We can get that information. So that's where we build those numbers to. That line 124, that's those 2 positions going from Fed to general purpose school. Jeff mentioned that, if you remember that before. And Mr. Blair. Line 131, you asked us to take a look at RNs. Right now, in this budget's 3 new RNs to try to get that nurse in every school. I mean, this is, again, your first draft budget, that's what that is. Instructional computer personnel, that line 138, that 3 position there basically is to try to, the STS, the school technology specialist that we have with the park assessment. And what's happening there, we backed it off a little bit, but some of our middle schools that are now 1,000 and more students have a half-time STS. We're gonna have to look at some way, because they go in and do a lot of our repairs, setups, that sort of thing. If we can make it work and fund it, they need some additional support there when you go into park assessments and that sort of thing that's going on. So that's about 3 there. Assistant principals, there's 3 there now. I mean, 1 will definitely be Stewart's Creek High School. The others are basically half positions. You've still got 3 or 4 elementary schools don't have any assistant at all, but just kind of looking at this SACS thing again that we did, we'll look at that with you too and see if that's kind of a rough estimate. And Jeff, we just see an increase of 1.7 or something like that. He does full-time equivalent. So, you know, when we have it at a school level where they operate the 10 months and that sort of thing, when you see the decimal there, it's based on full-time equivalents. And we'll spend more time with you when it breaks down exactly who all that might be. Educational assistance there, the 9.5, basically that's 2 ESLs, English as a second language, and about the others are mostly special education EAs, basically what it is. It's an expensive program. I want to remind you though, about 4 years ago, we were running about 14% special ed, and we've gotten it down to 11, and that's a tremendous saving if you can make this work. And hopefully this response to intervention and personnel we're putting in there will do the interventions much quicker, and we won't have students that are classified as learning disabled. We can address it much quicker, but we're going in the right direction there. Maintenance personnel, there's those 2. You know, I mentioned to you basically when we have to take over Stewart's Creek High, and with the additions and all that we're doing, we have the 1 year that's a maintenance warranty that comes with the construction, but that year's up for next year for Stewart's Creek High, obviously. And then the speech and language, again, that's another position that goes from the old federal budget to the general purpose school budget That's another one of those that shifted for us. And Jeff, I don't remember the other salaries and wages. Do you remember what that may be right now?
Kevin Whittington
Right.
and 2 other positions in the instructional department.
Okay. So that, Kevin Whittington, he was the one that we employed was raised to the top funds. And we employed one person. Basically, we knew at sometime at the end of that 3 years, they actually gave us an extension, so we're getting into the 4th year for that. He's the data person for our system. Basically does that. On page 2, line 315, again, if you want to make your note, basically seven transport buses and 1 sped bus. That was the 8 that he talked about, as you're looking to that. I told you about evaluation and testing there. The RTI Square Universal Screener, the unfunded mandate, it shows up in line 322 there, basically is where it went. And we don't have a real good figure on the dollar. We're making an estimate there. But you know, that alone, as you can see, may cost us another $260,000 or so. You know, just looking at it, it's actually more than that, 286 roughly. And you can estimate this based on your number of pupils times what the going rate runs, basically there. So that's what that is. See if I made other notes. It was most of the others just normal increases like custodial supplies, that sort of thing. Looking at page 3, I think you can follow most of that. Some library book increases, a big textbook increase because of the math. That shows up there in the 449 line in your summary. Looking down through 701 administration equipment. I'll tell you what, a lot of that has to be. Have you noticed our sound system in here, the quality is really getting bad? The other night it was crackled a whole lot. And we're having trouble now with the broadcast, what's going out over Rutherford County. The estimates for this runs in the $40,000 to $50,000 range for this type of audio system to get back up to where that's that item. Okay, I mean, that's basically what it is. Maintenance equipment and other, again, is attendance and health equipment are basically not talking about big figures from 1,000 to 3,000. I mean, from 3,000 to 4,000, all, but percentage-wise, they look large, even though it's not lots of dollars. So I think that's most of the things. But I'd like you to dig into it and match it up with the line item numbers that's on the subsequent pages, and that's what we can talk about more on the 16th when we come back. Where can we adjust? Where we missed something that you wanted to include? Where is something that we might could swap something out? And will the revenue change? That's the other piece.
Mr. Odom, right now we have, am I correct, we have 13 snow days built into our calendar.
We accumulate 13
Right.
from going the extra time, and we use 2 days to do our PLCs.
Okay. Presently, our classified get 2 snow days.
Relate that, Jeff, the classified, how our snow day and makeup
They
works
have-
with that.
2 paid ones, and then 4 that they can make up.
If
They're not paid for them.
But only if they work them and make them
They
up.
basically work for them, so
Right,
basically what he's getting at, you're giving them 2 days.
yes, sir.
We actually gave them a third one this year, didn't
We
we?
did,
We had to shut everything
Yes,
down,
we had to
so they basically got 3 this year.
You know, I guess when you look at it, you're almost looking from an actuarial point of view is that, okay, you have 11 days or you have 6 days. You know, historically, our winters are not severe here, so the chance of those being paid for are probably not good percentage-wise, but there's always that possibility that they could. How would you propose that we could maybe look at increasing the classifieds to at least being, 5 to 6 days, since the certified have 11, I think it'd be fair to look at classified to have 5 or 6.
Is it 1,040 hours? It's been a while since I've done. How much is a classified basically for the year? What is their budget?
A 10-month classified, 9 or 10s, anywhere from 1,300 to 1,600 hours.
So basically, it's in your budget to pay them
Right.
if you chose to do that.
Yeah.
If you want to change your policy.
Yeah.
Now, your bus drivers are going to get their contract.
Yes.
Even if you take a snow days, because you have a contract signed with them. Because you call school, doesn't change that contract with the bus driver. Your teachers basically are going to get paid because of it. They are actually working the additional time. When you go for the extra day. So teachers are working with that extra half hour per day. So when you take a snow day, they do get paid. So your discrepancy would be in your classified. Now, the other little pieces to that, we're doing okay in food service right now, but when you decide to pay them, that's totally self-standing. Food service is, we have to make it work, federal monies plus hours. So in that case, you would, each day off, you're gonna lose a little, every day you pay them in that. And that's not necessarily a part of your budget.
Right.
But yet on your other positions, it is really a part of your budget. But I certainly welcome that conversation if you wanna look at that.
I would like for
I
us
don't have
to.
any problem with that, because it really doesn't change your budget numbers particularly.
Right.
And I like that idea of going 5 or 6 days. The one difference that we do have with our classified staff, and I remember the winter of 1969 is when I was out the most in school. Our teachers are already contracted. If we had to go into June, they are already contracted for those days, as are our bus drivers. It would be additional funds if we had to go really late into the year for classified staff. But I think a 5 or 6 day number is an equitable number.
I
And
heard,
given that we have that other reality, if we really do have that disastrous weather situation.
my ears were piqued on the news last night when some Kentucky system were making up 30 days. Did any of you hear that last
Yeah.
night?
Yeah.
And of course, what Jeff is saying, if you paid them all 11, but then you have to turn around and make up between 11 and
Yeah.
whatever that number
Yeah.
comes out to be, then you're gonna have to come up with new monies to pay that. So, you wouldn't teachers and you wouldn't bus drivers because they offset.
Yeah.
But it would affect some of those hourly
Yeah.
people in doing that. But I think it's a good conversation for us to have. We just need to understand all the
Well,
parameters.
and this winter's been aberrant for everybody. I mean, with the cold, we've been pretty fortunate here. We were kind of under a snow umbrella. We got cold, but we didn't get the snow. And I think the last time I can remember it being this cold was back in 1985 when it was 17 below with a 50 below wind chill. So that was almost 20 years ago. So maybe we got a little stretch here to go that'll work with us.
Well, and in my years here, actually the years where we had flood days,
Right.
we were out more days from that than we had been out for snow, I believe. Does that seem right to you, Jules? Yeah.
Mr. Sandvik, is there a negative impact on revenue if we have fewer IEP students based on BEP formula? That was a whole lot of letters in
Well,
there.
There would be, but the BEP formula doesn't fully fund our cost of it, so it would be a net savings to us, even if we lost some of our BEP revenue.
Okay,
If we did have to expend,
but it's a net savings.
it would be a net savings,
Okay.
oh, yes.
All right.
As
And I would,
As Mr. Eakes informed me the other night, we need to get definitions and handle these acronyms for BEP, the Basic Education
Yes.
Program
Yeah.
for people that's watching on TV, and an IEP is for special individualized educational plan for that particular student. So that's what those two things mean, I guess.
So, and then the RT squared,
Is
RTI
response
squared.
to intervention squared, and the squared is because it will serve both special education and regular education. So in their little acronym naming, they stuck the little 2 out there
There
to
you go.
stand for that.
So, and then I'll go ahead and explain then, if our response to intervention is incredibly effective, and we have fewer individual students with individual education plans, then will we receive less funding on the basic education plan for funding, is kind of where I'm going at. Not that we would change what we do, because if we can have more students that are achieving at grade level and above, that's an education win, and that's what we want. But, you know, does it have an impact? And
No,
your
you're-
answer is, it's still a net savings.
Well, you have options. Special education is based upon the hours of service per week. And so those options go from about 1 to, I don't know, residential is 12, 13, something like that. And state monies, their part of the state monies are based upon that option number, the weighted service hours that it might be. So, if a student was not special ed but regular ed, then if 1.0 is your funding for a kid in that group, that's what you would get. But then if you're not having to serve them, they may not earn 1.3 or whatever it is, but then you wouldn't be providing that service either.
Right.
So, you know, my goal, if I can, I'll say this to y'all, my goal is to try to see if we can't get somewhere down in the 9% range or so. I think it's fairly efficient. We're always gonna have students that are handicapped, folks. I mean, they're physically handicapped, there's lots of issues. The group that you're working with are the learning disability students. The people who, for some reason, are having a problem doing their reading or their math or something like that. But all of those other multi-handicapped and the others, RTI Square is not going to address that. You're basically addressing the ones that happen to be learning disabled, which is by and large the largest number of students. So in other places where it's worked well, 9% in that range or something seems to be a reasonable number.
Did we get everything that you were thinking?
Remember, we're talking percentages again, not numbers of children. So if we're reducing the percentage from, say, 14% to 11%, we haven't reduced the number of students we serve because our system grows so quickly.
Absolutely.
Our numbers are greater and continue to increase in student size, but the percentage of the overall 100% student body is less. So don't forget, we're talking percentages, not raw numbers.
If we grow 1,000 students next year, if we follow the same rate, you're gonna have about another 110 students in special education.
Exactly.
I mean, that's an easy way to understand what we're talking about, even holding the same rate.
Now remind me again, how many different languages do we teach? in
About 65 languages last time I asked, in Rutherford County Schools, roughly 65 languages.
At one point in Smyrna Elementary School, I had 54 languages.
Just one
Just
school?
building.
See, they're over 40% ESL, that's when.
And you're saying students that speak that number of languages.
54, 75.
The IEPs are another state requirement.
Federal.
Federal requirement, okay, which the state and local picks up the whole funding, or
No,
does
the
federal
feds,
government
some of
participate in
it,
that?
some of it's fed, some of it's state, some of it is local. And that is when a student has a certified learning disability, let's say, the parents sit with the school, with our school psychologist, and you work out goals for that student, and that becomes that student's plan, and you monitor progress towards that, achieving those goals. That's what it is.
So the funding is shared between
It is
all three
shared.
entities.
It is shared. And we're picking up a little bit more of it because, as you saw, we had to shift several from feds to the G3. Tonight, you saw extra positions there.
Anybody else?
Good bedtime reading. Cure your insomnia.
It looks like we've got enough homework to last us 2 or 3 weeks, so, what always helps me, and I'm sure the rest of you the same way, is I take it line item by line item. And, I like to basically analyze what we're doing from one year to another, and then basically come back with questions of why that's the best way for me to do it. Now, everybody's different, so, but we've got enough here to study on, and I would encourage you, if you come up with any other questions, call Mr. Oldham, Mr. Sandvig, and,
Right, if you don't understand it, shoot us an email, call us.
you may have something that'll, something that somebody's forgot, or something that may be good. What I'm getting at is it'll just save us, if you bring it next board meeting, Mr. Sandvig will have to go research it and all that, so it'll save us a little additional time, maybe move us ahead of the game.
Very well presented, and I am so grateful that we did away with the tier structure. That was so.
So am I.
Okay, yeah, it was confusing for us, and I think for the commission and anybody else that took a look at it. So just very well done tonight.
Mr. Eads?
A little off the subject, off the budget, but I had an opportunity today to talk to 2 school administrators, superintendents, and both of them were very encouraged by the results that the teachers are getting with Common Core, and they said they had no negative responses from those people employed in their system at this point about Common Core. So again, we talked about educating on this topic, and it's just something we need to be aware of. I think sometimes we see something written in the newspaper, and we take that to be the gospel truth. But as your teachers can tell you, they deal with it every day. They see the improvement in the students. This perhaps, and somebody made the comment that it goes back to the way they learned themselves. They talk about it. They are encouraged to try to explain their thinking and let others explain their thinking to them. So again, we just need to continue to try to educate people about Common Core.
Read one thing today about people said there was no input in it. People, the public could not. But it was posted on the web, and we were sent out, said, teachers, you can comment, send feedback for, 6 months or more, Mr. Zago?
Yes,
It was
sir.
a long
So
time.
Actually, when I spoke to the public, when they brought some concerns here last year, it had not been said at that time, and I had invited them and given them those email or actually URLs so that they could go and make public comments on the accommodations for special needs students and also English as a secondary language students, and comments on all of the standards that were being posted at that point. Yes, sir.
Mr. Holday?
It's nice to see our friend Milan here this evening. I wanted to say hi to her. And the summary sheet that Mr. Odom gave us at the beginning, I think the takeaway from that, or at least for me, was Rutherford County School Board saves taxpayers over $2 million over the last 10 years.
Are you writing her?
I'm just, say what you said, then, remind them what you said. That was the kind of a takeaway from me. School board saves taxpayers over $2 million over the last 10 years.
That would be a great
Are
headline.
you applying for a job at D&J here?
Well, it's $2 million a year.
$2 million a year.
You got 41,000, you say $56 per student this year, less than what you would have spent for inflation, so that was 1 year.
There we go.
Yep,
Outstanding.
great headline.
If you want to get a little more technical,
You come up with a new school, don't you?
take
It don't take long.
your $1,200 average,
That's right.
Well, that's
and
good.
multiply that by 41,000.
We're over 50 million.
So you're about $50 million.
Yes.
Those are supposed to last you until you retire.
So,
Yeah.
I think,
But I pay taxes too, and for people listening to us on TV, it is my job, it is all of us jobs sitting up here to deliver services to those students, high quality, students learn at the most economical and feasible way that we can do it. And I think the numbers show, with our competitiveness and our scores, we've been pretty good at that.
Yes.
And the public can be proud of that.
I guess before we adjourn, Ms. Michaels, could you go over our next meetings?
Yes, we have to do. On April the 15th is a board work session at 5. April the 16th is 5:30 is a special call budget. April the 17th is a board meeting, a regular board meeting at 5. April the 23rd is a special call budget meeting at 5:30. And on April the 29th, it's a 5 o'clock, a board work session. And May 1 is a board meeting.
Okay.
You want more?
No, that's good. I just wanted to make everybody aware of the next ones we got coming up, so they can put it on. I'm sure everybody's already got it on the calendar, but, just as a reminder, so. Anybody else have anything? Once again, Mr. Sandvig, thank you for a well-done job, and, we'll study it a little bit and come back on the 16th in regards to this, so. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned.